if we plan to just be ready to be live next time around? Okay, great. I can help make sure that happens.
Cool. In the meantime, do we want to go around and do our good news icebreaker? How does that sound, Anna?
Yeah, that sounds great. Do you want to start?
Cool. Sure, I'll start. Yeah, so my good news since we last met, I just wrapped up an intro Python programming class. I've been trying to self-teach programming for quite a while, and I wasn't quite ever able to get over the hump of the discipline it takes to kind of learn something like that by myself. So this last semester I was doing a class, and I just wrapped it up. And yeah, pretty sure I passed. So yeah, that's me.
That's so exciting. Congrats.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. I'm going to put the agenda that we sent around in the chat here, y'all. And so this is what we're starting with, which is just intros again, since it's only our second meeting. And then instead of an icebreaker, we thought good news would be fun. It'd be great to know what's going on in your lives and feeling good.
Cool. So who wants to call them out? I guess I can go next according to how I see it on my speaker view, which would be Theron.
Hi, Theron Makeley here. I'm with Resilient Denver and DSmog Denver. I have some good news in that I had my first luncheon with 5 other people with no mask and a great conversation, mostly about gardening, but it was just nice to be back to some normalcy.
Awesome. That does sound fun. Yeah, and as everyone gets vaccinated, it's really refreshing to see some human faces again, for sure. Next, I have Renee.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute. Hi, everyone. My good news is this weekend I found out my friend from Seattle who moved away when I was in 6th grade moved to Denver. So I'm going to hang out with her this week. Kind of exciting.
Awesome. And Anna.
My good news is garden related, which is that the snow last night didn't kill my baby broccolis outside. So feeling successful and like I can do anything today.
Good deal. And then Lauren.
Hi everyone, Lauren Quillian with Excel. My good news is that I get to travel to see my brother at the end of this month, and I haven't seen him or his 3 kids in 18 months.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. All right, next I have Johnny.
Hey everyone, Johnny Rogers, the staff liaison from the climate office. My good news, we were able to buy all of the vegetables that we're going to plant in our garden bed. They're hiding out on a table right now in our house as we wait for the warmer weather tomorrow. But we have everything we need and excited to get it in the ground.
Nice. And Jason Sharp.
Awesome. Nice to see everybody. I'm Jason Sharp with Namaste Solar, and I'm excited. My good news is I've gotten my 2nd vaccine and my parents show up. It's the longest I've been without seeing my parents since being born. And they're coming to help us work on our house and celebrate my daughter's graduation from 8th grade. And she moves into the big high school next year. So looking forward to family.
Awesome. I have Elizabeth.
Hello, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Ramos Torres, and my good news is I'm really proud of my son. He is getting ready to go to continuation. He's going to go from 5th grade into middle school. So it's been an amazing year. It's been difficult with like online learning and everything. He goes to DPS, and so we're kind of like, whew, thankfully.
Awesome. That's next I have Sam.
Hey everybody, good to see you again. So my good news is echoing a lot of what I've heard so far. Now that both my dad and I are fully vaccinated, I get to see him for the first time since Christmas of 2019. This weekend, he's flying out to Denver. So looking forward to giving him a hug.
Awesome. Noticing a common theme with some good news here. Brooke?
I'll stick with the gardening and say I got some free mulch from the city, and that's always appreciated.
All right. Free mulch. Kristen?
Yeah, hi everyone. Kristen with the University of Denver. I'll stick with both of the themes. I got to hug my grandma this weekend, which is amazing, and I moved to a new place and now have a garden.
Rad. And Keith?
Hey, everybody. My name's Keith. I'm with the Inc. Sustainability Board. And I guess our good news is that we got Inc., which is the coalition of all the Denver neighborhoods, this weekend voted to endorse the Youth Sustainability Board's resolution that they're putting before Denver Public Schools to increase DPS's climate action over the next 20 years.
That's rad. And Suzanne?
Hi, good afternoon. My good news is I got a promotion last week to assistant business manager, and I am the only woman business manager in the 5 locals, IBW locals in the state of Colorado. So, and for all the gardeners out there, anytime after Mother's Day is a good day to start your garden. So my mom says anyway.
Congrats. And Sarah?
I found out that for the summer, I got selected to volunteer at the Butterfly Pavilion. So I'm really excited about that.
Awesome. Love it up there. Jason Harris?
Yes, gonna keep the train rolling. Similarly, got to spend time with family over Mother's Day weekend and got a flight booked to the Bay Area to go see some more family at the end of the month. So just excited to be vaccinated and return to that normalcy.
Yeah, no kidding. And Dara?
Hey everybody, Dara from the Green Wave. My good news is this week I achieved complete chemical balance in the aquaponics, or the home aquaponics system I've been prototyping here. So it's really cool to experience all the fish waste being effectively transformed into recycled food for my plants.
Sweet. An achievement there. Matt McNear?
Yeah, hi, Matt McNerney. I'm with Grid Alternatives. Oh, no, that's fine. With Grid Alternatives, I'm going to echo the gardening motif here, which everything is starting to look really, really nice. The bad news, though, is I swear I can hear the grass growing, and we're heading into like twice a week mode. And I guess that's good because there'll just be some extra exercise outside, so that balance all as well.
Awesome. And then, oh, I need to write this out. Saina?
Not quite, Cena, but nice try.
Cena. Okay, yeah, I'll write that down.
Yeah,
forget that.
Kind of like John Cena, but cooler.
Oh yeah.
The
device.
Yeah, I'm Cena with the PUC. Some good news for me is my friend and I actually went to a recording studio recently and are recording some songs. And I actually just had a guitar music video come out. That's pretty cool. So I'm proud of that.
How can we find that?
Yeah, you definitely have to share. You can't just mention that.
I get in the chat. Yeah.
I can put in the chat after. And the other good news is after a long day and after this meeting, I finally get to shave, which I'm excited for.
Awesome. Okay, and then Sebastian?
Hey there, I'm Sebastian Andrews. Awesome to see all of you again. Good to be virtually here. Keith totally stole mine. I was watching the resolution for climate goals to be met by Denver Public Schools and feeling really optimistic about that. So I guess mine will be completely unrelated in that I just had a great smoothie. It's my good news.
All right. Yeah. Good news can come to more than one person. It's fair to say. Cool. Did we miss anybody? I think that's everyone. Okay. Sounds like everybody's doing good and return normalcy and a lot of gardening going on. Glad to see it. Okay. Let's see what's next on the agenda here. Okay. So I think with the doodle poll thing, we got some good fidelity and good yield out of that. It took a couple days. Took me a little while to figure out how to use it. Sorry about that whole time zone fiasco. I guess they automatically set you up in Switzerland, which I find kind of strange. But yeah, thanks to everyone who filled that out, which is pretty much everyone. But I think it's going to be most, and I think the consensus with everyone is it'd be most helpful to find a meeting time that is going to be somewhat consistent. I think if there is maybe like if you can't make it and you have to call out and then there seems to be an inordinate number of call outs, or if there's a holiday, then we can obviously, adjust to everyone's needs. But is there any objection to finding a time every month that works? And I guess, if we think that we should just keep polling every time, if you guys are comfortable just getting, doing the polls and the email and responding to that.
Well, and can I make a suggestion?
Absolutely.
How do folks feel about this time for our monthly meeting time?
Right.
Do we need to go through another doodle poll, or can we just use this?
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
gonna say maybe like the second Tuesday of the month or something at this time.
Okay.
I'm seeing a lot of heads nodding and thumbs up, so that's good.
How about we do the other thing? How about if you have an abject issue with Tuesdays 5 to 7, second Tuesdays of the month? How about, can you just throw it in the chat or say something vocally right now? Would be a good time.
And Tuesday of every month works really good for me.
Okay. Looking good for Tuesdays then.
All right.
All right.
So is it okay with everyone if I just extend the calendar invite for today for the second Tuesday of every month? So you'll get an invite from me after this meeting with all that. Okay, cool. I'm going to do it. And then the Zoom link will always be in that. And I'll be sure to send it around ahead of meetings so that it's at the top of people's inboxes in case that link isn't easily accessible.
Okay. And then another kind of housekeeping issue for communication. How are we feeling about the email chain effectiveness of that? I know personally my email gets pretty bogged down with all kinds of different things, and the council and the committee is kind of getting awash in some of my other business. So I was just curious, we're curious if there's another platform that might work for people, and if anyone has any recommendations. I know Slack is pretty much free and a good easy app to get with a lot of integrations. Some people don't like it, but I know that we could just continue with the email chain. I don't think a traditional social networking platform is appropriate for what we're doing, like Facebook. And then I guess another question to go with that is like, are we looking for a platform that might have an instant chat feature? Or what kind of platforms and what features would we be looking for? And I think probably one of the baselines is it probably has to be free. I don't think it'd be reasonable to ask everybody to get on Microsoft Teams unless everybody's already on that. I like that platform myself, but and this is kind of just an open question for suggestions and concerns, questions, comments.
I want to take a look at the chat. I think Dara's put-
Slack.
Oh, I said
Stack.
Stack.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have input in that.
Go for it.
I would say that Slack feels good to me. I like the idea because it has all the different subcategories you can break it down into. And I think that especially being that this is such a broad topic that we can have a lot of different kind of solutions we're playing with. it'd be nice to have more focused conversations in that way that specific people want to tap into.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think it'd be helpful to have a different platform and also like be able to like organize different threads, because I think sometimes with emails, multiple issues get rolled into one. I'll have to check over here. A lot of those new things I don't have access to necessarily, but I can definitely look into whether I can get into Slack or some of the free ones.
Yeah, so in Slack, I think they're called channels. So you refer to everything under this kind of like hashtag organization, and you can go into each channel and start its own thread, message thread, and then keep the subjects and topics organized, not just from the topic, but then within the topic. Then you can go another level and do chats in there.
The other thing I was going to see if the group thought this would be a good idea or not was to create some kind of resource page. I think we're going to throw out a lot of great resources like the Climate Action Plan or other things and links that we can easily have available to access outside of like an email chain or a Slack thread.
Yeah, is Google Drive okay for that?
Yeah, just something.
Yeah. Yeah, because there's very good, I know there's very good app integrations with Slack and Google. I think that's why that it is popular that way. Okay, well, if everyone feels all right giving Slack a try, I might go ahead and drop that in there and send everyone an invite. Okay.
Is Slack free? Sorry, I've never actually used
Yes.
it. Oh,
Slack is free.
I'll work on downloading.
Cool. So that's something that we'll just kind of get set up in between now and our next meeting, which will be exactly a month from now. And we can troubleshoot stuff in between or at the meeting if needed as we get folks set up.
That sounds
I
good.
think it'll take a second for us to get into a groove with it.
Yeah, and I might start some test threads and conversations and see how they work out. Go from there. Awesome.
And maybe we could have a conversation on our next meeting about what kind of channels we think we might need. Okay, cool.
Cool. All right. Well, next order of business we have here is the SAC report, which you come in and kind of talk about the council meeting that Anna and I partook in. I know a lot of you were watching that as well. As far as things to report, I think it was similar to our first meeting. So I don't know if you have anything prepared for this, Anna, or a summary, but yeah, we basically all reported. Every committee kind of gave a little bit of background after introductions, and then we reported on what our committee was working on and a little bit about, how we felt. Pretty much every committee is super stoked about who they have and just the diversity and representation in their groups. And ours, was no different. We also did add optionally the council member, I think is Cashman, is that right? Paul Cashman. So he is an optional member now on our committee, so he might be popping in here. I'm not sure with what frequency or how much input he'll have, but that is an option just so everybody's aware. We heard a lot from Grace, who's I believe the CASA office head, is that right, president? And she kind of walked us through a lot of the norms of the council and how things were going to happen. I think one of the takeaways that I think were that took a little bit of understanding. I think even the transportation committee came forth with, it seemed that they already had like project ideas that were like from their first meeting that they were ready to see funded. But I think there was some clarification from Grace that the council actually doesn't, and this is in the bylaws, I believe, but that the council doesn't decide which projects get funded, that it's actually the CASR office that makes that decision. And it seems like, yeah, so that took some clarification from Grace. I think she had to say that a couple times because I think there was some confusion about, and I think in our first meeting when we were clarifying, I think we were kind of all wondering what our roles are here and what exactly how the Climate Protection Fund is going to get implemented. And it seems like Dara has something to say. Over.
Yeah, I was just going to reflect saying that yes, maybe our group's purpose itself isn't to pitch an idea or pitch a project proposal, but I mean, I think that this is very much like a think tank, so to speak, with a lot of us having some of these organizations that can fulfill some of these project proposals. So like, as we have our discussions, I don't think there's any reason that we couldn't come together and submit an idea and kind of run with it,
Yeah, that's a really good point, Dara. And I think, so this first meeting was the very first one for SAC, right? I think when we have this 10 minutes in these meetings moving forward, Armando and I will likely have more like substantive updates about what other committees are doing, what opportunities there are for like cross-pollination between electric sector work that we're kind of doing and, buildings maybe or transportation and such. And so we'll just plan to have this be a standing item on this agenda so that we can A, answer any questions from the SAC meeting for folks who have them, but then B, just like report back about what other committees are doing, what the opportunities are for us to engage, if anything, and just to kind of make sure we're on the same page about how things are moving forward. And Johnny, I see that you wanted to say something as well.
Yeah, I think just on the note of, Grace being very clear that the committees and the full SAC, just because they vote on something, a program, it doesn't mean that it's going to be funded or, be implemented. But that's still kind of the whole point of having these committees is if you have good ideas, I want to run with them. I want to figure out how to get them funded. I want to figure out how to put them into practice. So even though, it's not a guarantee, that's where I get to work with you to try to make things a reality. And this group brings those perspectives, brings new ideas, is able to check in on the things that we're doing. And, I hope you all hold me accountable to the goals that the city lays out and comes and figures out how can we do it even better.
Yeah, well said. Does anyone have any questions about the SAC council meeting and what happened there? It was, if you can just go ahead and stack. We have Renee first.
Oh yeah, what was the transportations? What did they bring to the table?
I think they were talking about an e-bike program, if I remember correctly. And they were talking about providing e-bikes for essential workers. Yeah. Yeah, great sounding. And then Kristen?
Yeah, just wondering if those meetings are publicly available for all of us to watch. Apologies if that was what you mentioned.
Yeah, definitely.
Is that on
they went live on, I was watching it live on, I was watching myself live on Facebook from Denver's CASR office page. And then I'm not sure where else that, Johnny, do you happen to know maybe where else that was posted?
It was on Facebook Live. I'm going to try to find the website and see. It looks like the meeting recording's on the website, so I'll drop that into the chat.
Thanks.
Don't lose track of all the stacks above this link.
Right. Then Lauren.
Yeah, did you mention if the SAC doesn't make those decisions, who does? Is it the mayor or?
The CASR office. Yeah.
And we report to the mayor. So, if he tells us no, we have to listen. Tells us to do something, we do everything that we can to make it happen. So far, my experience working with him is he's very pragmatic, willing to listen to good ideas and work with us on how to get it done. So far so good, but the mayor holds a lot of power in Denver.
Thank you.
And then Theron?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment. I watched the SAC meeting and there's a lot of discussion around how the money will be divided in that. I would encourage us to think bigger than just the 40 million. The task force last year recommended 200 million a year. So the 40 million is just a piece of what funding should be available. And then recent news out of the mayor's office is the mayor was going to request to raise $400 million to do some COVID recovery. And yesterday he found out that the federal government was going to give him 300 million. So I don't know where, all that money goes, but to me, it looks like there's an extra 300 million that the city has potentially available to it. If we come up with a good idea, we shouldn't hold back. And I just want to get away from the scarcity discussions that the SAC was having about how to divide the 40 million and should it be divided evenly amongst 6 different groups. And I think the sky should be the limit on funding, because preventing the climate crisis is what we're all about. And it doesn't matter what the cost is, we have to do that.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, and we can, I'm gonna write down that point to bring up later is, other funding sources and how we can play together. Suzanne?
Yeah, during that meeting, it seemed like there was a lot of discussion about the community choice electricity. And I didn't know that that was like a thing or regulated through the PUC. So I was just wondering, like, was that just like some conversation, or has that been decided? Because I know there's no real legislation about that.
I don't remember talking about community choice during that meeting.
Yeah, it doesn't.
They mentioned it like a couple of times, so I don't know, like if it was just a topic.
Okay. Yeah, we can. This
To
can be
answer your
something we actually.
question briefly, Suzanne, there's a bill going through the legislature that would study community choice energy. It would not enable it. So, a community wouldn't be able to form a community choice aggregator like the way that there is in California and Illinois and a few other states that have that legislation. So if this law was passed, the PUC would be required to study it over the next year, come back to the legislators with a report saying whether or not they should pass enabling legislation. So it'd be a long process before that were actually in place for folks to take advantage of.
Maybe it was just like a topic like that they were trying to discuss. Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah, I didn't get the sense that community choice was like anyone's agenda or anything.
And then Sebastian?
Yeah, I just wanted to tack on to Theron's point really quickly. I think, on the point of scarcity, I think it's also our responsibility as a committee, not only to, like Theron said, think beyond the 40 million, but think about how we could get beyond the 40 million, propose solutions that will continue to generate revenue for the city to do the work it needs to do to get us on track for the goals that have been outlined in so much literature that we now kind of have at our fingertips, the 80x50 plan, the task force report, and all the other ones that basically highlight what is right now a massive shortfall of money to get to where we need to be.
Okay, well, it seems like a couple members have that on their mind. Johnny, can you speak to that at all? Or is that something that we need to figure out together?
The role of this group, definitely, let's think beyond the resources that we have, but also let's be really thoughtful about the resources that we do have in our hands. So, if we have the opportunity to invest in, a few $100,000 here or $1 million there in different programs that can provide direct benefits to the community, let's do that. But then let's also think about, are there ways in which we can tap into other funding streams, whether it's the, federal stimulus dollars that might be coming through, bond program that the mayor's office announced, other capital planning projects that the city can pursue. Some of those may be better suited for municipal facilities and kind of city infrastructure investments, and others may be better suited for community-based programs and direct support to community-based organizations and local residents. So we need to think about all of those different things. As far as the federal stimulus dollars go, we were given 4 days to submit shovel-ready projects that the federal stimulus could support. So I put in about $30 million worth of solar requests and see if any of those get supported. That would be awesome. And then I'm also working with our Department of General Services, looking at all the different rooftops across our municipal facilities to see for this next round of funding and this bond project, what else can we do? What's out there? What are the things that have been on the cusp of affordability that, we just haven't done because there haven't been dollars available to make that upfront investment that we could target. So we are working hard on the kind of municipal infrastructure side of things. And I appreciate everyone's, interest and support on those types of ideas, but I will be leaning on you, I think, to a greater extent on how we make investments directly in the community, create the most accessibility to renewable resources for all of our nonprofits, low-income residents, you name it. But I'll stop there.
Well, I will say one thing. We are kind of outside the scope of, we're kind of seamlessly going into vision and priority setting, which is the next big topic here. So how about we just go into that, and it's going to be a facilitated discussion to define our vision and priorities, which is pretty much exactly the topic we're on now. So
hey, really quick, Armando, there's some folks who are on stack. Is it okay if we visit those really quick?
Yeah, well, that's kind of what I was wondering. So it seems that we're seamlessly kind of moving into this next discussion. But if you guys want to stay here, we can. I'm just curious as to, seems like we have a couple other agenda items, and I wasn't sure if we were going to, considering like what is our vision of success, priorities, and what are the areas to make a significant impact, and as well as equity. But if that is a different topic than what we're talking on now, then we can just stay here. No
well,
problem.
Maybe can we just ask the question for the folks who are on stack? Is there anyone whose question or comment won't be able to get answered in a visioning or priority setting conversation in a moment here?
Okay.
Cool. Maybe just, I see like Theron and anyone else just chime in, and then we can move on maybe.
I just felt that this revenue conversation is not in a visioning type statement. So I was hoping we get through this revenue conversation just so we can all air what we want to say.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely think revenue could be for example, like a Slack channel of its own for conversation for sure, and we can just continue to do work on that because that work is ongoing. Seems like so.
Yeah, as a quick note, I would say like I'm kind of along the same lines as what Johnny is saying, in that like we have $40 million to spend now. What's the first thing we spend it on? And then kind of worry about getting more money as we need more money. Personally, that was what my stack was, but I'm happy to continue the revenue conversation more offline if we want to keep moving.
I was the other stack person, so I'll and it's segueing into what you want to talk about, Armando. So maybe this is a question as far as how we evolve vision, but there's short-term funding and long-term funding. And my understanding is that we're here to discuss the Climate 2A funding, which is going to go for an extended period of time, is our major purview. And I don't know, are we able to advise on the one-time funding coming from the federal government? That feels like a separate conversation, and maybe that's a separate Slack channel, and this group could bring ideas that are sort of one-time funding issues. But my understanding is that's a one-time fund, shovel-ready type of opportunity, and that what we're talking about is ongoing revenue and something that we can set up that are supported and funded programs that the city can use to bring climate issues to community. And so I guess from a vision perspective, like that's my understanding as to what our main purpose is. It doesn't mean we can't advise on the other things, but it seems as though the ongoing revenue is more our focus, was my thought.
And my question was for Jonathan, like when you proposed that $30 million of solar projects, was that that was never part of our group discussion? Like, did we make sure that those were like Davis-Bacon wages or, livable wages that were going to be proposed
Yes.
to do those projects?
We make sure that all city infrastructure projects have pay prevailing wage. and follow other kind of local employment related ordinances and work. And we also have a partnership with Grid Alternatives as part of our solar development master contract that we have. So Grid provides job training to at least 10% of everyone who's on the job workforce. And we'll continuously be looking at ways in which we can increase our job training opportunities, ensure that we're getting people into career track jobs, and hopefully opening up the door for more developers to be able to work with the city as we ramp up our solar investments.
Okay. All right. Yeah, obviously we have more to say on that topic, revenue. Okay, so next on the meeting agenda, we have the priority setting, visioning and priority setting. I think, Johnny, were you gonna help facilitate this?
Yeah, so I will walk us all through an exercise now that we did with a consultant recently on some of our kind of green jobs type thinking. And so hopefully I can do it as well as the professional facilitators did. You all can let me know, but I found it really useful in terms of getting us all on the same page and really thinking about, how do we set these goals in a way that are going to be really achievable and high impact as well. So I'll walk through a few kind of introductory slides here that sets the table for the discussion. I will put into the chat, if I can find it, the link to this, because you all will have the opportunity to fill out kind of sticky notes to get ideas down on vision and priorities that we want to achieve as a group. So I like to start by seeing sort of what the end picture looks like. Our group should have a vision, we should have priorities, and then we should have ways to measure the achievement of those priorities. And they may be differentiated by different kind of opportunities or target sectors. That could be rooftop solar, community solar, or purely for or storage or something like that, where priorities might be, increase access or achieve energy cost savings or move as quickly as possible on decarbonization. So those are the kinds of things that we'll talk about. I don't think we'll get to the metrics setting today. Our goal is really get a lot of ideas that can help us get the foundation of what the vision could be and what the priorities could be. And then we'll do work between this meeting and the next one to take all of those brainstormed ideas and try to craft more tangible or concrete statements that can capture those. So delivery starts with a vision for change. What will be different? So the vision is what we're trying to accomplish, and being able to articulate that clearly will be critical to our success. It's the overarching ambition and moral imperative. It is the what am I trying to do? So it helps align us all and motivate us through that clear purpose, helps us to coordinate our work. Everything points back to that vision and will help us prioritize between competing actions. I think there's not going to be any shortage of ideas for this committee or for the work that people are doing in our office. But having this foundation will help us really focus our energy. I'd rather do a few things really, really well than have 100 different ideas that we're chasing down and nothing gets done because of it. So good vision has 5 features. It needs to be ambitious. So we want to make a real difference to citizens' lives. It needs to be urgent. So inspire a sense of urgency among those who do it. So us and me. Attainable. It can be challenging, but we need to be able to realistically accomplish this. And we need to think about what can we control versus what can we influence, and the things that we can influence, how do we make sure that we influence it in as real of a way as possible, really make the change that we're seeking. It needs to be clear. We want to be able to communicate this easily. We shouldn't have a very convoluted vision, and especially as our group being the channel back to a lot of folks in the public and other organizations. We want to make sure that they understand it, and measurable. Of course, we actually want to see, are we making progress towards it? Are we, are we on track to reach our vision? I think someone might be typing. If everyone can mute who's not talking, so we don't pick up that background noise. So a couple example visions from around the world. So to enable every learner to acquire the necessary skills and competencies to successfully transition to post-schooling opportunities, provide a high quality of care and positive experience for patients and their families across all public healthcare facilities, to make affordable housing available to all of our citizens. And you'll see those attributes reflected in these visions. They're ambitious, there's urgency, it's attainable, it's clear, and you can measure progress towards whether or not these visions are being attained. So here's two examples that I pulled out from some things that are very relevant to us. The 2A ballot, one of the lines in there that at least resonated with me is to ensure that future generations will be able to live, work, and thrive in the city without an omnipresent climate crisis. I think at a very high level, that's really the goal of the climate office. A sustainable community is one that can continue to live, work, and thrive, and not have this existential threat hanging over our heads. From our 100% renewable electricity action plan, we stated that Denver's renewable vision is to enable a rapid and equitable transition to a 100% renewable electric system in Colorado. So we chose this vision to be greater than ourselves. We didn't want to write the vision in such a way where Denver could, on paper, buy a bunch of renewable energy credits and say, okay, we're done. We're 100% renewable, and everybody else, you need to pick up the slack. We're really seeing this as we need to contribute to a full systemic shift in the electric system that we're a part of. And it needs to happen quickly, and it needs to happen equitably. So at this point, this is where we kind of want to bring everybody in and lay it out there. What is your vision of success for this group? And it can be as narrowly focused or as broad as you want, but keep in mind the ambitious, urgent, attainable, clear, measurable. You can each pick a sticky note. If we need more, you can copy and paste and add them to the screen. And you can either do it as, concepts that you want to see captured in the vision, or you could even take a crack at trying to write a vision statement. And so let's just take a minute to brainstorm, get ideas down, and then we can talk about them, see what emerges, have some discussion, and see where people are thinking are the things that really stand out the most or the most important to them. if you're struggling to add an idea to the boxes, make sure that you have this window open in your own browser. While I'm sharing my screen, you won't be able to click on that and do anything. You'll have to click the link and open it up separately. All right, well, thanks for all these ideas coming in. I can, add a few more boxes if we need them, although they may be off of the screen, unfortunately. Then I think in a minute here, start to look through and just see if we can identify some common themes that are coming out, and just a bit of an open discussion for a few minutes before we move on and about what we want to prioritize within this work, within this vision. All right, I'm going to start taking a look here. Yeah, feel free to continue adding ideas, tweaking what you have. But I'm seeing quite a bit on increasing solar deployments, seeing a few on workforce training, seeing a lot on community access and ensuring that the benefits of clean energy, economic, environmental, and otherwise, are really targeting the people who have been the most disadvantaged or historically marginalized. Does anyone want to, maybe we can use the stack again in the chat if people have things that they want to comment on. What's standing out to you all? What are the things that you really want to draw attention to? All right, Dara.
Cool. I guess something I just do want to bring attention to in this moment is a statement of dissent on one of the comments that I'm seeing. Just based on that we are trying to root these solutions in a sense of equity. And when I read the enable homeowners and landlords to tap into future revenue streams in order to attain savings for upfront energy efficiency and electrification options, that seems like it's more pointed towards benefiting those that have more economic empowerment. And I think that the focus should be more towards direct benefits for those that perhaps aren't already seeing the advantage of being able to own property.
Thank you. And I think Anna is going to be taking notes as we have this conversation so that we can capture some of those ideas and observations, and we'll have more than just the sticky notes that are drawn down to pull from as we think about this over the next month.
Yeah, Dara, I think that's a tricky and interesting, issue. And I wonder about our ability to help people with ownership. I put the help low to moderate income people access capital, either back their loans, because a lot of times people can't even borrow money, and actually owning some of these assets actually creates more wealth over time than simply giving a discount on your current utility. Like, so it's great to get a discount on your current utility, but it doesn't generate long-term, assets or long-term wealth. And so, how can we support access to assets that traditional lenders and traditional vehicles leave behind in the market? And so I think that is an interesting one. And I think it's a more than one approach. And I do think some people who do have own homes but can't afford something like solar or windows or heat pumps or all of the things that actually can save them money over time. PACE tried to do something like that, but what can the city do to back people in borrowing money for long-term generational wealth gain? So I do think it's something we could do as part of many solutions. There's not going to be one solution that works for everyone.
Thank you, Jason. Sebastian.
Yeah, I just love Jason's point. And I also think, tacking onto the note about PACE, I mean, one of PACE's major shortfalls in trying to get renewable energy accessible to lower and middle income communities was the fact that it was only available to citizens and not often to just residents. So I also would think that should translate, if we are to use the word, that word in our vision, we should use the word or default to using the word resident as opposed to citizen.
Great. Thanks, Sebastian. And I think as we get into the priorities discussion next, we'll start to see how some of these things might actually be more of priorities within a higher level objective and kind of where things will ultimately fall in terms of what goes in a vision statement versus what goes in a priority discussion. Any other comments from folks? Renee.
Hi, yeah, this is a little bit different than what we were just talking about, but I see there's a lot of solar on here for the vision statement, which is really cool. Solar is a really great renewable energy source, but I don't think it would be in our best interest to only do solar. There's a lot more other renewable energy sources. And as a vision, it might be more beneficial to have something more broad. I know like in Seattle, our McKinstry office there is tapping into sewer water to get heating. There's just a lot more opportunities besides just solar, even though solar is a really good way to start, and especially here in Denver.
Great observation. Thanks, Renee. And Lauren Quillian actually only messaged me stack, but we'll still give you the floor to speak.
Sorry, I'm not a millennial, even though I technically am. Um, I had a similar comment to Renee, and almost I think about it even broader. I have trouble even with just renewable alone. I think a lot of the policy conversations around clean energy, so there might be even other opportunities that we don't want to cross off if it doesn't fit in the formal renewable definition. So expanding beyond just renewables. And also kind of tying the other, I think a lot of fair access, equitable access. I think that's going to be really important, and kind of drilling in on what could get us there and what does that really mean might be really, really helpful. And just, I'm from a utility, so I have to say it, but affordability and reliability and safety, none of that can be, we have to maintain all of that as we move forward, because that's also a part of this, is making sure everybody has the access to reliable energy as well. So just wanted to add that in the background as we think about the vision as well.
Thanks for that comment. And for some context on the renewable versus carbon free, Denver's Climate Action Task Force actually recommended carbon free. The 80 by 50 plan was built around 100% renewable. So our action plan stuck with that definition, although we did have a kind of subchapter discussing the nuance between the two and being very clear that we're open to a broader swath of technologies than just renewable, but those will face higher scrutiny, and we expect them to be brought before the Public Utilities Commission for use in electric resource planning or investments directed by the utility, where they can get the scrutiny that they need to ensure that they are affordable, reliable, and carbon-free. But for our own investments and for the purposes of this group, you can go as broad as you want, just because the mayor's original plan was 100% renewable. We're open to going bigger than that. So I like the conversation about more inclusivity and options. Anna, I think you're next up.
Cool. Well, I love these. I don't see anything on here that I don't love. And I particularly want to give a shout out to whoever wrote visible solar in public spaces, because I'm a very visual person. So I like seeing what our vision for what our world looks like is. The comment I guess I wanted to make is I would be interested in figuring out how this group's vision fits underneath or within the framework of the existing visions that you did share, Johnny, just considering that this group is kind of inspired by those programs anyway. And so, yeah, that's, I think, putting back on here. So it's I wonder if there's some of the things that we've added in these post-it notes that we could just add to some kind of a combination of these two, so that we're not necessarily changing the direction that city leadership and consultants on this are moving forward with, but maybe we're adding value with some of the values that are showing up in some of our post-it notes. I'm seeing kind of a theme around ensuring that disproportionately impacted communities are supported in the process, workers, as well as I think I see a couple about rates and ratepayers. So I wonder if I just wanted to offer that as a path forward here to setting a vision.
If people want to respond to that, throw a stack in the chat. And so I see Jason, you're in there.
Yeah, it's kind of related on existing work and existing vision, but we're also one of 12, right, SAC groups, and
6.
Sorry, okay, thank you. Exaggeration. So what is 6? But isn't workforce development another one? And so does that help us refine what our lane is? And I think of electrification is energy, but isn't there a buildings group? And so I didn't think about that. And then one of my thoughts is efficiency. Where does efficiency land? Is that in the energy lane, or is there another lane that's focused on efficiency? What help me understand what our lane is, because I can easily get out of my lane really quickly because all these different things are of interest to me personally, and I'm sure many of us. So I'm sure we could go down the wrong lane really fast. So, and I also don't want to leave anything out that I'm thinking of, but I'm like, oh, somebody else has got that, so I'm not going to put it on a sticky note. So I think the questions are: workforce is another one, and is energy efficiency somewhere else, or is that in our lane?
So I mean, I encounter this, every day in my job of, we're trying to deploy solar, but create good jobs while doing it. And we're trying to, improve the energy efficiency of homes. Or when I'm advocating for things at the PUC, there is a connection between demand side management, demand response, transportation, electrification. Like everything connects to the grid at the end of the day. So I think there will be those gray areas and some overlap, and it'll be for us to decide, what do we decide? We can control it, we can make an impact, and we know it's important to the city because there's another group entirely that's dedicated to it that can be collaborators with us. And then there's other things that we're going to look around and say, there's nobody else. If we don't do this, no one else is going to do it. So maybe we need to prioritize that more because we're on our own. But I think that'll be for everyone to discuss as we go along of, what are those different areas? Where can we play a role? Where are we a supporter versus where are we the lead or even the only ones carrying the flag?
So real quick, just to clarify, like energy reduction is huge and takes upfront investment for consumers. So is that being handled somewhere else, or should we put that here because there's no one else?
I would think that that's more buildings and homes. Where
Okay.
they're very focused on efficiency, at least in the two-way. I mean, if you looked at it narrowly of the one line that says increase investments in distributed solar storage and other forms of renewable energy, that's the most narrow way to look at our group. But I do think of energy as much bigger than that of, okay, that might be some of our core attention, but we need to be thinking about how do we integrate with more efficient net zero homes? How do we integrate with increases in transportation electrification and managed EV charging and trying to power those vehicles with solar or help to balance intermittency of renewables? So I think that's, at least for me, how it comes together.
Thank you.
And Theron, I see your comment here. Are we working for one overriding vision for our committee, or will this be a series or portfolio of visions to meet an overarching goal? So I see it as there'll be one overriding vision, and then we'll have multiple priorities to achieve the overarching goal. So this is the example from the workforce programs. Our vision is to create career pathways and expand opportunities for individuals from under-resourced communities, enabling a just transition to support a climate resilient and sustainable Denver. And within that, 3 priorities, which we'll get to these in a moment. I want to stay on the visioning discussion for a few more minutes, probably 5 more minutes. We've got a couple other stacks in the chat. Dara.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think that while energy generation is the inherent focus of this group and where we should kind of like really be diving deep on, there was some note in the overarching SAT committee that was speaking about the inherent synergies and symbioses that we'll be experiencing with the other groups just through understanding how they all interplay and understanding what should be prioritized when. Like we could even like understand with the limited budget we have available, maybe it is the first priority for us to fully retrofit all of our buildings and homes to be more efficient before we even start to transition to energy. So I think that it's good to have that context in mind and also figure out how we can kind of cross-pollinate between these other groups to learn how we can work together too.
Thank you. Sina.
Hey, Johnny. I was just wondering if you could maybe talk at a high level or however detailed you can about kind of like the relationship between what the city can do or what the city wants to do in the city's vision versus what Xcel Energy could actually do and what their electric resources would be. Because I think for me, from the regulator point of view, I'm kind of thinking of things at a state level, since that, that's literally my job. And I think I'm having some difficulty trying to connect the disconnect in my head of like, the city's goals versus what Excel does and how we kind of fit into the picture there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, at first when the 80 by 50 plan came out, Excel didn't have their clean energy plan to get us to 80% renewables by 2030. It was going to be a lot lower than that. And so I think a lot of attention was on, okay, we really need to build our relationship with Excel to encourage them to do more, do better, or consider other, policy mechanisms or options that may or may not, be available or would need to be created to help dramatically increase the renewable content of the overall electric system. I think we're in a very fortunate place now with the plan that was just filed, and I'll be advocating on the city's behalf throughout the course of that proceeding, really looking at the proposed investments, the timelines in which we can accelerate coal retirements and shift away from fossil resources. And I think we'll continue to put steady pressure through our regulatory activities, through our direct collaboration with Excel, in terms of how we think about the overall resource mix on the system. Now, there's still going to be a gap in 2030 from Denver's goal and where Excel is going to be. Hopefully we can narrow that as much as possible. But there's also a gap in terms of, where are those assets physically going to be located? Do we want more projects that are utility scale, built out in kind of the middle of nowhere, or regional connectivity through an RTO? Or how do we really increase investment locally to the greatest extent possible? How do we tap into distributed energy resources as the primary mechanism to fill that gap, and not use it as a, as a bridge, or this is the gap that we need while Excel works on getting the grid clean? It's, these can play a role now and into the future, and always, how much distributed energy resources are going to be necessary for the true functioning of an affordable, reliable, carbon-free electric system. I think the more that we focus on the connectivity of all of our homes, buildings, EVs, distributed solar, distributed storage, that provides opportunities to avoid investments in transmission infrastructure. It provides opportunities to empower customers with investments into assets that they can control, they can make available for grid benefits, and they can also use for their own resiliency. I think we're constantly exploring, what is that right number in terms of like percentage that should be distributed versus utility scale? What do we rely on to try to generate ourselves, or have customers generate themselves, versus that provided by the utility? We don't exactly know. We know that it's more than what we have right now. We think that Excel has been more and more responsive to the ideas of distributed energy resources and customer-sited assets. I think still in the infancy of distributed storage and demand response programs, and I'm hoping that in the next DSM strategic issues proceeding, those will obtain a lot more attention. We're starting to see managed EV charging programs come out through the Transportation Electrification Plan. If the beneficial electrification plan passes through the legislature this year, we'll have another probably $100 million annual plan focused on going from gas to electricity. So that's a very long answer to say, I think our focus needs to be, what role does distributed energy resources play in the future of the electric system? And how do we make that happen in a way that's going to retain the affordability, reliability that we're all used to, and I think is necessary for the system to exist.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thanks. That was pretty clear, and put some good context in. And I definitely agree. I think that next strategic issues proceeding is going to be pretty big. So thanks.
Lauren.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that explanation was really useful. And I think to the extent we can, there might also be things that you can leverage from what the utility is doing in addition to distributed solar. So I think figuring out those ways to leverage that will be helpful. I actually had a separate comment, which was just when we were looking at the link to the description of our committee, it does mention adaptation and resiliency. And I happen to notice that's actually not in any of our vision statements. So thought we might want to think about where that fits in. And that might be, you know, additional work that Denver could do outside the utility as well. So just another area I wanted to highlight.
I agree very much. And there is a group that has adaptation and resiliency in their name, but I think they're more organized around the environmental justice component of that, helping community members that are in high risk areas due to climate change or are experiencing, you know, increased heat effects and trying to keep them cool in the summer or out of flood zones and things like that. I think that our energy committee has a huge role to play in enabling broader adaptation and resilience for the entire system. And when we look at Denver's critical infrastructure, I think our role, our committee is the one that will be able to lead that effort. It's like we have rec centers right now that are used as emergency shelters, and if they have the emergency shelter capability, they've got a gas generator is what keeps them up and running. Now we've done some initial work looking at battery storage to replace those generators, but the generators can run for a week at a time where the battery system can do, you know, 4 to 8 hours. So there is a little bit of a technology gap for some applications in terms of resiliency. And at least right now, the generators in those emergency shelters, you could call them carbon free because they're not run at all, you know, maybe once every couple of years. So their carbon footprint is very, very small. But that's not to, that's just to help put some perspective on, as we approach these solutions, let's be really thoughtful about, we need to solve the community problem first, at least in an emergency situation. And then let's think about the way to do it most effectively from a carbon accounting and technology that would have multiple benefits. I'm hopeful that battery technology will continue to improve so that, you know, the 99.9% of the time where we're not using rec centers as emergency shelters, they've got a battery that's providing grid services and are getting a credit on our utility bill for providing that service. But then when the emergency comes, now we actually have a battery technology that can support the critical resilience needs that are really required to keep the community safe. So food for thought. But yes, Lauren, thank you for bringing up adaptation and resiliency. And I look forward to everyone's ideas on how that can be incorporated more so into our committee's work. Theron. Theron, you may be muted.
Sorry, having some trouble unmuting. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I just wanted to add on to that adaptation and resilience that we always need to be considering everything we do. We should have some type of a checklist or filter on us. I'm sure Lauren will help us with that, but it should be built into our process so we can do that. Back then to your answer to Sina's question, it got me thinking about energy supply, and I was wondering why this committee was called energy and not 100% renewable electricity or some version of that. And it got me thinking, should our group be covering the natural gas supply and the propane supply and diesel supply? If you go back to the task force report, there was a section on the different emissions, and I think 30% were from the electrical grid, but there was another 17 or somewhere in there, it was just under 20 that was from the renewable gas supply. And I think propane and diesel were in there too. There's some grouping of fossil energy, but I really think that maybe we should be, as a supply group, that we should be keeping track of all these different energies coming in, and I'm not sure what we call them, but making sure we're taking care of all those things.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think the way that we've approached it so far is that, yeah, buildings and homes and transportation are kind of responsible for their own energy supply and shifting it to electricity. And then I've been responsible for trying to shift our electricity to renewables and carbon free so that as we have electrified buildings and homes and transportation, they're getting it from environmentally friendly sources. So I think that's kind of been the driving assumption of electrify everything and the natural gas system will transition out. That's obviously, requires a lot more thought than that, but we need more people, we need more brains, and fortunately we have you to be thinking about, what is the future of the gas system? And at some
I like propose we added in there, especially with what Lauren suggested earlier, that we're transitioning gas to maybe a cleaner gas system. Then let's include that in what we're doing here, because it's a similar type of supply. I mean, you could argue the electricity is already being taken care of by all the buildings and the other programs. So we're kind of redundant on that, but we're also looking at it from a different angle. We're looking from the outside in, whereas those other groups are looking from the inside out.
Yeah, and I think I may need to look to see how the phrasing was in 2A to make sure that it wasn't narrowly focused on electricity, because that might impact at least climate protection fund dollars. But broadly, our work can absolutely include all forms of energy, be more inclusive from just a supply perspective and all of the different infrastructures that are out there. So if you want to jot a note on that on one of the sticky notes, just to capture that idea, we'll make sure that we have that captured as we synthesize all this information going forward. All right, we're going to do these last two stacks, Dara and Sebastian, and then we're going to move on to the next exercise. Dara.
I was just quickly going to second what Theron was saying, in that I feel that one of the main goals behind the energy group was to decarbonize our entire grid, and I think that requires an assessment of all the energy sources that are producing carbon, just assessing them and understanding how we can transition away.
And Sebastian.
Yeah, just tacking on, I think it's kind of a before and after thing, as we continue to electrify more as a city, both municipally and residentially, as well as commercially, it becomes more in our wheelhouse, because then that's, all those electrified appliances or processes become part of the demand that we are, looking at as a group and trying to figure out ways to both, decarbonize the grid as well as do the demand side management. So I think it's almost more of a time thing or a before and after thing, then it becomes our responsibility.
I think the biggest challenge that we're going to face as, let's assume every new building in Denver starting in 2027 is all electric, and existing buildings, we invest a lot in electrification. As fewer and fewer customers are buying gas through the gas system, there will be fewer people who need to pay for effectively the same amount of steel and infrastructure and pipes to move around that material. So the cost of being a gas customer will likely increase pretty dramatically. And how those costs should be shared, and is our energy system, electric and gas, one big energy system that everyone in Colorado has been a beneficiary of and should be responsible for the transition away from? Is that necessary to avoid creating a situation in which, a few difficult to electrify industries are left holding the bag and creating horrible price shocks that we aren't ready for? So food for thought for the future. Jason, you'll get the last one as I transition here. Go for it.
Well, I think the opportunity here is that there is an opportunity for a way to fund things that aren't economically possible otherwise. And so the problem with reducing gas consumption is it can increase costs on people who can't get away from using gas. So what can the city do to either subsidize the use of gas for those left behind, or pay for those people that can't transition to transition. So I think that not everything in this situation has to be completely economical. That's the opportunity here, is how can the city use this funding to pay for carbon reduction and energy transition without it having to be profitable for the utility, without it having to be profitable for the consumer, but to subsidize this transition. Like that's the whole point. Like not every idea we're coming up with here means to be profitable for everyone involved. We are subsidizing a transition away from carbon. So I want to keep that in mind. Like that's the whole point.
Yeah, and I think we're about to have a case study on this with Excel's Steam system. There's only about 100 and something customers that are on the Steam system that runs through downtown, and prices just went up 40%, and a lot of customers are looking to get off of that system. And the PUC has required Excel to do a study of their Steam system, of those customers, and report back by next May with, what is the plan for the long-term use of the Steam system? Is it phasing out entirely and going away, or what is the future going to be? And I think that's a very small, it's a much smaller customer base and smaller system that I think could be representative of the challenges that we'll face with the gas system in the future, and we'll hopefully learn a lot from it. And Lauren, because you probably know more about this than anybody, you get one more and then
Sorry, I'll try to be brief. I was just going to say, yes, the Steam system has some of the similar issues, but there's a lot of differences and a lot because those customers are very large. And when we're looking at the gas system, I think we've got to be very careful because we can't pick the winner yet. We don't know what the winner is. And while I think there's a lot of opportunities for electrification, it's going to have to be done slowly and carefully. And I think we can't dismiss that there might be still a role for the gas business and for those pipelines. And we've also got to figure out, and there's probably a lot of Denver citizens that actually really like those pipelines and prefer that use. So as we think about that, I just encourage us to be, not pick the winner and think about that there are some other ramifications for that we're going to have to work through. Like, if you switch to electric heating, we got to make sure that's not served by natural gas generation, which it's likely to be because it's happening in the middle of the winter at 2 a.m. when it's 0 degrees. So I think we've got to keep some of that in mind as we think about the transition, because all that's going to affect all Denver citizens as well in a lot of variety of ways. And I will stop my soapbox there. Thank you.
No problem. I'm already loving this group. I think we're gonna have some really, really interesting conversations. We've got our work cut out for us for sure. But now we've got to prioritize what we're gonna do. So thanks so much for all of these ideas. We've got, I think, by me, Anna, and Armando will go through some of this to try to organize some thoughts, categorize ideas that we've seen, and help jumpstart the conversation. We can use the Slack channel and I think a follow-up survey to help sort some of this out.
And just to add a finer point in the survey, if it's okay, Johnny. So we'll look at these Post-it notes, but we'll also include a question in a survey that we'll talk more about at the end of the meeting here, where you can add additional thoughts on what you'd like the vision to be after the conversation. And we'll just take that all into account and bring back something to the group to offer.
Great.
Or maybe even a couple options.
Yeah. And so now priorities, we get more specific than the vision. The vision is that high level, ambitious, urgent, what are we trying to move, and priorities within that, more focused. So for the workforce group, came up with 3 priorities: to drive demand for quality jobs, to reduce barriers and increase access to programs and careers for residents from under-resourced communities, people of color, and workers in industries in transition, and to ensure that the jobs created align with Denver's sustainability priorities. So we're going to do the same exercise now to get ideas down on sticky notes. I have these stars here so that people could, second things that they really liked, but let's not worry about that now. We'll use the survey and other follow-up work to vote on and support priorities. that the group wants to embrace. And again, if you have trouble entering ideas onto the sticky notes, send it to me in the chat and I'll drop it in for you. Give another minute or two for folks to keep on typing, and then we'll start another quick discussion as folks wrap up their thoughts. I want to make sure everyone feels, the opportunity and confidence to be empowered to speak as well. We've been having a really good conversation, but it's been a lot of the same voices. So if there are others who feel free to share, feel free to put things in the chat. If you don't want to say it yourself, you can chat me directly and I'll say it for you, and I won't share who you are if that's important to you. I'd love to hear a few others share their opinions. And considering the time, we'll see how much more we're able to get to today, but we might come back to some of the other activities in the next meeting. So at 6:45, we'll do a kind of stop and check where we're at and decide how we want to use the rest of our time. Anna, go ahead.
Hey, so I'm just looking at what themes are in here and trying to capture those. So it looks like there's a lot about, or a couple places that 100% is mentioned as a priority. There's a few places where distributed generation or DERs are mentioned. So it looks like there's an interest in prioritizing that. And then just generally more renewable energy seems to be a theme across the board. So I thought that was worth highlighting.
Is anyone surprised by any of the priorities that they see here? Or a priority that they see listed? Dara.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it'd be cool to almost rank some of these priorities later on, just to kind of get our, what's the 1, 2, 3 of what we need to action first. And I also just want to mention that I do kind of piggyback on what Lauren was saying earlier about a certain priority of focusing on the electricity, like making that carbon free before we start to electrify everything. Because if we are focusing on electrification first and then powering that with carbon intensive infrastructure, that it's not going to be a win. It seems like those needs to be one after the other if we're going to do that.
Thank you. Yeah, I think some of our next steps here will be taking this list and likely adding to it with the survey and then prioritizing, voting, and it'll be a process before we get to, a handful of clean, clear, measurable priorities that we vote on and pursue as a group. And it doesn't need to be 3, it can be more, but at least the best practices, according to our consultant, was, keep it limited. Otherwise, you'll be just spread too thin and will be much less effective at accomplishing anything if we try to do everything.
Was the goal for 100% carbon free for Denver 2025 or 2030?
2030 for the entire community, 2025 for municipal operations.
Got it.
Other thoughts, folks in the group who have an opinion or Matt McNearney, what do you think? I always like hearing your opinions. I don't feel so bad putting you on the spot.
Thank you for that. No, this all looks good. I mean, it seems like we really just need to do something. I like the one, if we could start playing with our stars. I like the one about doing something soon, just very visible to actually show that we're actually making progress. And then I think we probably need to balance short-term and long-term, just with a balance of projects that would, one, some things we can do, low-hanging fruit, at the same time taking on some of the really more interesting, and as Jason would say, like not economically viable otherwise, because that would give us opportunities to do things that we just couldn't do otherwise. No one could do otherwise.
Thanks, Matt. Other thoughts?
I put stack. Can I just start talking?
Oh, there. Hey, Renee, go for it.
Okay, I just actually had a question. So are we, Anna mentioned like a survey at the end. So we're just putting these here, and then will we have like a discussion about what our vision is, or I guess what are the steps moving forward?
Yes, there will be several steps before we come back to you and say, this is the vision, these are the priorities, deal with it. It'll be iterative. There'll be opportunities to provide feedback. We'll, get to the, straw person proposals of, here's some wording that we think captures the vision and priorities of the group. Bring those up for discussion, see what should be adjusted, use, anonymous voting, use open discussion. We'll try to come up with a whole bunch of different ways to work through the process to get to something that, everyone in the group is excited about. I think that's most important, that we're all on the same page, working in the same direction, and able to realize our vision. Sam.
Sure. So I'll just echo everyone else and say that I really like all of the great ideas we're seeing. In my mind, there just seems to be this overarching theme, and maybe it's just based on my experience, but start with energy efficiency, and then once you've reduced the demand, you can then, with the renewable energy-based power system, you have the ability to electrify everything else. So it just seems like there's these logical steps that we should be thinking about when we go about our work. But again, just really love all the ideas, but just wanted to throw that out there as something to consider.
Thank you. And Brooke.
I'd like to piggyback on that because of, I think energy efficiency is needed, and then coupling any electrification with renewables in regards to how people are going to pay, especially renters, homeowners, anyone on the residential side. Just through electrification, bills are going to go up, and so how to keep those affordable. And overall, I'm just looking at all these and considering how we're gonna pay for all this. Like thinking that perhaps there's a separate task force or something to be looking into what other entities are doing, what are all the funding resources that might be available, and to even if there's additional grants or something that cities can be applying for from the federal government or from whoever, but to be identifying those opportunities to supplement what we're trying to do here.
Absolutely. And I'm hopeful that the Climate Protection Fund gives us a big leg up when we go after grants, because we can provide a meaningful cash match, which is often a requirement for a lot of grant applications, and we don't always have it, where now that gives us a little bit more, I think, opportunity to really make our dollars go farther. So I'm hopeful. This group, I think, will be instrumental to identifying those ideas, evaluating them, looking at how we partner with buildings and homes on electrification programs, and when we electrify, is that the time to do solar at a low-income home or multifamily housing unit? And I think that's where we'll be thinking really strategically about how all these dollars come together to make the biggest possible impact. Cool. Well, we are at 6:46. So the agenda that we had, I think I've already used up more than my time on divisioning and priority setting facilitation, but hopefully you all have been getting a lot of value out of this conversation. I certainly have been. So the other things that we were going to touch on are looking at the different sectors. And this was just going to be, jotting down notes and ideas. I think this can be captured pretty well in a follow-up survey. I've put some ideas here already. There's likely more. And then we'll also want, what are things that we should be thinking about in these very specific areas. I would like to spend more time talking about equity and, what's already working from an accessibility, equity perspective, and what are the major barriers for some of these. And I think, as this list gets refined, likely through the survey and some follow-up work that we do, maybe that'll be the time to have this conversation next month. So that could be a priority for us if folks are okay with that. And then the other things that were on the agenda is I can give an update on some of our active projects that I'm working on for the office, and also help set the stage a little bit for, how do we think about, what is the evaluation criteria to decide what the office should fund or where we spend our resources. That's going to be linked to some of our priorities and our vision, but just a high level example and ideas of what we're already going through. And then maybe I'll just turn it over to Anna and Armando to wrap things up for us for the last 8 or so minutes. Does that sound okay to anybody? Any strong opposition? Put it in the chat and we'll discuss. All right, great. So seeing none, we'll skip ahead of this stuff. We'll come back to it. So now you know that this is for what's coming next, important things to think about. Organize the ideas from these brainstorms, create a survey for the committee to vote on. I'll let them talk through those next steps in more detail in a few minutes. And I'll just jump ahead to this update. So I spend a lot of my time, as you all know, at the Public Utilities Commission, advocating on behalf of the city for all the different programs, policies, things that are ongoing, and collaborating with Excel to try to make this systemic shift happen. Then I also work across our city agencies to identify, where do we have opportunities to deploy solar, and how do we do it in a way that's going to be as equitable as possible. I think in my first conversation with you all, I talked about the Renewable Denver Community Solar Initiative, where we're building community solar as covered parking in rec center parking lots, doing EV charging underneath those solar carports. 80% of the power goes back to city facilities or our partner facilities, and 20% gets donated to income qualified residents, and working with Energy Outreach Colorado to assign those subscriptions at no cost to the subscribers, as well as housing properties managed by Denver Housing Authority. So we've been working through the design of these 9 systems that we had approved by Excel in last year's application cycle. We're hoping to get our contracts into the city council process in kind of June, July. This is the first time we've ever done anything like this in the city, so it's taken a lot of brain power from the attorney's office and Department of Real Estate and a lot of other groups to see this happen. Been meeting with registered neighborhood organizations and city council members since around last Thanksgiving, even beforehand. But hopefully if all goes according to plan, and we'll have construction starting by Q4 of this year and completing by middle of next year. And we're actively working on our different sites and partners to apply to Excel's next round of the CSG program, which will happen in the 3rd quarter of this year. I mentioned earlier submitting $30 million worth of solar projects to the federal stimulus opportunity that the city had. Those would be a part of anything that we apply to Excel. If we get approved by the CSG program, then we would be able to build them as community solar. If not, then we would have to interconnect them directly behind the meter so that they would exclusively serve the municipal facility load. But if we have the federal dollars, then we can make a much more competitive application to Excel's program, because we do have to compete with private sector solar developers, and a big part of what differentiates which projects get selected is the economic viability and kind of what incentive price you're asking for to sell the solar back to Excel. So that's a lot of time, a lot of effort, but I think really, really exciting for the city. And at least from what I've seen so far, a really good way to connect people who are struggling with their energy burden, to help let them share in the economic benefits of solar without the need to take out a loan or have a roof that's even on their home, or a number of other barriers that they regularly face. I see Brooke put a comment in the chat, curious about the benefits and drawbacks to rooftop versus community solar, as we're looking and prioritizing recommendations if anyone has resources. I think that's a good topic of conversation for the Slack group that we'll set up. And I look forward to hearing people's thoughts on that as well, because I've been going back and forth a lot in my mind as to where to really prioritize time and effort. It's going to be a balance of the both, but I don't know to what extent. And we've also extended our solar co-op, which is a group purchase program. Only $30,000 a year. Solar United Neighbors is a great nonprofit that's been running this for us for a few years now. They effectively get like 150 people to sign up, and then they'll facilitate the selection of a local solar installer and help answer questions for people, get a group discount on that installation. I actually put solar on my roof through the co-op last year. So that'll just be a nice program to continue to make available to people in Denver, certainly looking to increase participation in that, and thinking about how we can get that benefit to more Denver neighborhoods. And then on top of that, be thinking about, where can climate protection dollars provide incentives for people to do those solar installations or add storage, particularly with a focus on equity, so that we can get more solar and storage deployed into communities that have been traditionally disadvantaged. That program isn't designed yet. It's not up and running. That's where I want to be doing a lot of conversations with you all to think about, what is the appropriate way to incentivize rooftop solar and to do it in a way that is equitable.
Can I ask a quick question, Jonathan, about the community solar program?
Sure thing.
Is the city applying to keep the RECs, or are you selling the RECs to Excel so that Excel gets credit for those renewable resources?
We're selling the RECs to Excel. It's the only way to make the economics of the program work. And it's part of there isn't a way to keep the RECs currently. I think in the next.
There is for the CSGs. The community solar garden law changed at the state level in 2019, that you no longer had to sell the RECs, that entities could keep them. And I just suggest that if the city is selling the RECs and you don't get to count them for your renewable goals, you are selling them to Excel's renewable goals. So and also, it's just interesting, a problem with the CSG market. It's a very finite market that's controlled by the utility. And so, government entities using federal funding to compete with private sector projects, is a pretty tilted playing field and could do economic damage to the industry as a whole, depending on how you win those CSG projects. One of the big problems is that it's not an open market, and, it does, disincentivize public sector project or private sector projects from being developed. And it's a problem with the CSG market that it's small and the demand is not being met by the utilities access. So I would argue that owning the RECs and doing distributed projects in the community and at the city level is a better use of government funding than CSGs, the way the market's currently designed.
Well, I look forward to talking with you more about this. In the interest of time, I don't think we'll go down this rabbit hole quite yet, but I do encourage you to read our 100% renewable electricity action plan and how we frame our targets and embrace actually strategies that we transfer RECs to Excel because they are required by Senate Bill 19-236 to retire RECs in the year that they are generated towards their clean energy targets, making us a contributor to the decarbonization of Colorado's electric system. You know, whether Excel counts the RECs or we count the RECs, the carbon impact on the system is the same. What's important is that we have a mechanism through which we can provide the economic benefits of solar to more people in the Denver community and can have the financial viability needed to get projects built in the first place. As we look to the future, you know, I agree with you. We want to keep the RECs wherever possible. We want to be, you know, thoughtful about that, but we need to get as much additive renewable capacity built as we possibly can. And if you like to, you know, I'd be happy to set up another just conversation with you if you want to talk about all of these ideas kind of offline, or create space for this group in a future meeting to go into this. And I see Theron seconding that idea of having a conversation on Jason's point and talking about that. So absolutely. And because we're low on time and Anna has chatted me that she needed 4 minutes, she now only has 2 to wrap up this meeting. So I apologize for that. And
I added a buffer knowing that we probably wouldn't get 4 minutes. So, okay, this has been really helpful. I'm feeling energized and my brain's kind of spinning. I think there's a lot that we need to kind of work out together here. So there's 2 things that I want to offer, for lack of a better term, as homework. So one is, and I'm not going to switch the order that these are in the agenda. So one is the what to look forward to next time. I think there's a couple of things that we didn't get to in this meeting that we'll plan to go over next time. We'll also revisit priorities and visioning and stuff. But one of the new topics that I'd love folks to start thinking of and maybe write down any ideas that you have for is, how do we as a committee want to share ideas and proposals with each other? So I'm sure we all have something that we're most excited about. I'm also sure there's a lot of overlap for that, but things could get messy if we're all just kind of throwing in big ideas. And so if folks could think about what kind of processes you've seen in other groups for proposals and ideas for group decision making, would love to talk about that in our next meeting. And then the second piece is the survey that we've kept kind of pointing to. So there's 6 things that I kind of heard in our conversation that I think would be helpful on a survey, and I want your thoughts on this. So one is probably some survey questions around the visioning, some survey questions around the priorities again. I also, since we didn't get to the sector specific ideas, would love a survey question or 2 about what sector specific ideas folks do have for things that this committee could work on and prioritize. And maybe under that kind of umbrella there, what's the one that you're the most excited about and would be the most energized around? 5th, I'm wondering if there are topics that this team is interested in learning more about specifically. So I think it was Brooke, your great question in the chat about, you know, what are the benefits of rooftop solar versus community solar? What are the questions like that folks have that would be helpful for us all to know in order to do our jobs together in an efficient way? And then the 6th thing is, we've got a lot of experts in this committee. And so as far as answering questions and learning more together, I'd love to know what people consider themselves an expert on so that we can kind of look to you as a resource on some of these things as we work them out together. So those are the 6 that I can think of. Does anyone have any other suggestions for what we should see on the survey? Okay, maybe nothing immediately, and we're at time right now, but if folks do think of anything, shoot me an email and we'll add it. I'll plan to work with Johnny and Armando to hopefully get a survey to y'all by the end of the week here. And I think it's the kind of thing where it'll probably take about 30 minutes to fill out if we're doing it thoughtfully. And so that might be something to budget for between now and our meeting next month. Cool. All right, well, it's a pleasure, y'all. Thanks for a great second meeting, and have a great rest of your Tuesday.
All right, thank you.
Thanks so
Thank
much,
you.
everybody.
Appreciate the
Thanks, Carl.
opportunity.